Good evening and welcome to our October 19th, 2022 Board of Douglas County Commissioners business meeting. I want to welcome those of you who are with us at the old courthouse, which is a full house this evening. Welcome everybody. And folks joining us virtually on Zoom as well. I'm just going to share a bit of information about public comment to get us started. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item that you're here for comes up for discussion. Additionally, near the start of our meeting, we will invite folks to provide general public comment to the commission, which is a time for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but related to general county business. Public comment will not be recorded and shared on the county. General public comment will not be recorded and shared on the county's YouTube site to ensure compliance with YouTube's content policies. But to hear public comment, individuals are always welcome to join us live on Zoom, virtually, or here in the courthouse in person. We will call on folks who are here in person first, and then we'll turn to online commenters who I will remind to please plan to use the raise your hand function whenever that time comes and listen for staff to call your name. You'll be unmuted. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that everyone give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. We also reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that comments received by the Commission during our meeting do not represent the views of the Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that anyone who is online will not be able to view that without a computer, smartphone, or tablet screen during tonight's meeting, but materials are published online for your reference, and a recording of this meeting will be available on YouTube and our website later. And with that, we'll jump into, we have a couple of extra items this evening. We've got a proclamation, then I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Willie to read.
Thank you. I did ask for the honor of reading this proclamation for World Polio Day in Douglas County in honor of a family member who has dealt with polio in his life for over 80 years. So, whereas Rotary International, founded on February 23rd, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois, USA, is the world's first and one of the largest nonprofit service organizations. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to immunize the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas to date, Rotary has contributed more than $2.6 billion in countless volunteer hours to protecting nearly 3 billion children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas there are 140 members of the Lawrence Rotary Club, 83 members of the Jayhawk Breakfast Rotary Club, and 32 members of the Lawrence Central Rotary Club, who have committed their time, talent, and treasure to continue to support of Polio Plus until polio is finally eradicated from the earth. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby proclaim October 24th, 2022 as World Polio Day in Douglas County and encourage all citizens to participate in this observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Do we have any guests with us this evening to receive this proclamation who would like to provide any additional comments? I see some movement back there. You're welcome to come up to this microphone. And there's just a little button you'll press until you see the green light, and then you're welcome to say anything you'd like.
Thank you for handling this. I'm Jennifer Berquist, resident of Douglas County and Polio Plus chair for the Lawrence Rotary Club. And so on Monday, October 24th, Rotarians from around the world will be celebrating this. And we just thank you for recognizing this at the meeting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a signed proclamation for you to take with you. Thanks for joining us this evening. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our next item, which I believe our Director of Emergency Management, I'll just leave it to you, Robert, to introduce and make a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Bob. Newton, come on up, please. So today we're going to recognize Bob Newton for his decades of service to Douglas County, the Board of County Commissioners, emergency management, emergency preparedness, and his response efforts in the community. First, I'd like to invite Chief Patrick up. Chief Patrick is the current chair of the Douglas County Emergency Management Board and the Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Thank you all. In 1979, the Douglas County Commission started a board for emergency preparedness, and that board was consisted of 5 people. The commission then asked Bob if he would be part of that group, and when he did, this group was formed to help the communication and coordination between the county and all the cities inside the county. And Bob, when he became chair, had the forethought and to include all the chiefs of all the emergency responders to that group. And then from that, in 1992, the state of Kansas decided they would make a mandate that they would have all the counties then have a local emergency planning committee established in each of the counties. Well, Douglas County had already had that well established with Bob's leadership on that previous group. So from that, it then spawned into him being the chair for 15 years of that group. And then when he retired earlier this year in July, he has spent 43 years on that board. So it's our great honor and my honor and privilege as the new chair to give him this award from Emergency Management for his decades of service to that group. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, well, you're not done yet. So I've actually known Bob since 1993 when I was here in emergency management the first time. So a long time friend of emergency management. So we'd like to further express gratitude to Bob for representing the commission for his 43 years of service. That's a long time, Bob. I feel old. Again, in the 90s, Bob expanded his role. He became he started serving as a duty officer for us. One of the first duty officers, one of 3, we were just talking about that back then. After 9/11 happened, we took the role of public information officer. So we took that on and managed that group for many years. You also handled many major incidents, exercises, and retired again in 2021 with over 25 years in that role. So sincere thanks and gratitude from the Board of County Commissioners. Bob, we wanted to present you with a small gift here so you can keep track of time in retirement. So that's beautiful. All right, thank you. Congratulations. All right, thank you. Yeah. I wanted to give Bob a minute to talk. He said he'd be brief.
Less than a minute. It's been kind of a challenge working toward retirement. I'm not very good at it, but I'm succeeding. It's taken me 12 years to shed all of my jobs, but I think I've finally done it. And it's great work if you can get it. My successor as your appointee to this board, Greg Gardner, hasn't come along that far yet in learning how to stay retired, but you couldn't have picked a better person to carry the torch. I mean, for crying out loud, he's the former director of Kansas Emergency Management, retired, living in Lawrence and volunteering for us. So Greg, thanks for taking over. And for those of you who are here, I hope not very many of you are here just for this, because I hate to take away part of your evening, but Jillian tells me there's going to be cookies outside, so maybe that'll help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob, for your service. I really appreciate it. And I always appreciate a little bit of Douglas County history too. And emergency management is something for our community to be really proud of. And it's cool to hear some of the beginnings, and that as with many things, this county has set the example for that kind of collaborative work, and the making sure that all the different communities and leaders of those communities are working together. And and that shows all the time. So really proud of our emergency management work. Thanks again for your service. We've got another item from Robert. Are you going to come up and provide this presentation also? Sorry, I forgot to check with staff about who is in charge of which agenda item.
Hello, thank you for having us, commissioners. We appreciate it. I'm Sean Byrne, and this is Chad Oman from the National Weather Service office in Topeka, Kansas. We're here to honor Douglas County Emergency Management for 27 years actually now of faithful service for the Cooperative Observer Program, which is a complete volunteer program that provides information to us on an as-needed basis. And what they've done for us for the past 27 years is actually provided observations for the river gauge that's actually near Bowerstock Dam. So we're here to honor them with a 25-year institution award. And we do have a little write-up here that gives a little bit of information, some history. It says the National Weather Service would like to extend our sincere appreciation for all the work you have done over the past 27 years. Your years of service as the cooperative weather observers for the Kansas River Gauge at Lawrence account for over 28% of the manual observations recorded since the record began June 1st, 1927. For 27 years, we have faithfully executed the duties of cooperative weather observer for the National Weather Service. River gauge measurements were always accurate and reported in a timely manner. The data you have provided has and will continue to be used by both the private and government sectors for timely and accurate flood warnings, water resources, and climate research. Your data has been used in classrooms, courtrooms, and everywhere in between. We appreciate your dedication and attention to detail while preparing for your observations, and the data you have provided will go on for many years to come. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. We have a nice little plaque for everybody. Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
commissioners, I would also like to add to that, we would like to also add to what we've said tonight about how important the work is that emergency management does for preparedness and awareness within the community for severe weather, hazardous weather, and their work that they do to reduce vulnerability from severe weather, and how much you've done over the years on our behalf for the Weather Service, and how much we appreciate that. They really are indispensable to us, and I hope you feel the same way for those of you in the community here in Douglas County. I've worked 25 years in the Weather Service, 3 different states, and Douglas County, Kansas has got the best. And so I hope you feel the same. So thank you.
And Sean, thank you so much for this award. It has been a dutiful service for us. We also have our former Director of Emergency Management, Terry Smith, here with us as well. Since a majority of her career was done climbing on and slightly over the bridge, trying to reach, because she and I are the same height. So it's a really interesting thing to watch. If you ever look at the photos, they're very interesting. But just for reference, these manual readings were done every Wednesday, every week. We went out and manually did this. It increased during flood events up to 3 times a day, many times overnight. And so our staff and our duty officers were the ones that were going out in the middle of the night during floods to make sure that we had those readings, so the Weather Service could give out proper warnings and let folks know what was coming downstream. So we're also grateful for the partnership with the Weather Service. That was really, really well shown during the May 28th tornado as well. So it's floods, it's all kinds of natural disasters that we really have to work together to make sure that we get the best warning to our community so they know what's coming and they can take the right action. So it's an honor for us to receive this award. We're grateful for our partnership. Thankful to Bob as well for his many years of service, and Commission, thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate the work you do, and always glad to have recognition from outside our community. So thanks for joining us this evening. All right, with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Does either commissioner wish to pull anything for discussion? Okay, is there anybody in the public who wishes to pull anything from our consent agenda? Okay, we'll bring that back for a motion then. I would double check that nobody's got their hand online. Okay.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Good, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, With that, we'll move on to general public comment, our regular. And for our regular agenda, we have one item that is not printed on the agenda, but that sort of walked on at the last minute. Sarah, do you want to introduce that?
Yes, Commissioners, Robert Benecki and Jillian Rodrigue with Emergency Management are here to talk to kind of an emergency walk-on item, and I'll let Robert explain it and outline what we need to take.
Perfect,
what we
thank
need to
you.
do.
Yeah, so just today, we had a formal request for a 5-day burn ban in the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. One of the fire chiefs said due to vegetation conditions, weather patterns, moderate winds, and the very low humidity levels leading to challenging behavior for them and fighting those fires, as well as equipment repairs, responder fatigue from the last 3 to 4 weeks of increased grass fire responses. We then polled the other fire chiefs in the county, and the majority of them agreed with the request for a burn ban. We're coming to you to ask for that request because it's a multi-day request. We're asking for 5 days. Typically, we would do that request based upon our position daily if needed. So we're asking that you'd issue a burn ban from October 20th through October 24th. And then emergency management would return to normal determination protocol on the 25th to decide that day.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions from commissioners?
I do have a question, Robert. So what kinds of outdoor burning would fall under the ban? Would campfires within a controlled campfire ring or burning within a barrel?
Control
Would that-
rings like that would be fine. We're talking about the larger fires that citizens may do to burn debris and other types of items like that, larger items.
So no brush fires or grass fires?
Correct.
Controlled burn?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question. I'm also just curious, you touched on it a little bit, but since I know every day the routine is that a call is made by a certain time in the morning, whether or not there's going to be a burn ban for that day. Is that correct? And so that's just that's a staff sort of decision level each day. Does it come to the commission when it's anytime more than a single day?
Yes. So and that's a very good question. So I actually personally do that daily. I review the criteria every morning before 8 o'clock, and it's usually about 5 o'clock. I'm doing that in the morning. I review the criteria that's listed in the resolution, make that determination. If there's a ban, then I will issue that burn ban. I'll send that messaging out, and then I'll also change the hotline, the burn hotline that citizens can call in on to determine, to see if there is a burn ban for that day. And if there's not, then if they did do a burn, they would normally call in to dispatch and log their burn. Because this is more than one day, multiple days, according to resolution, the commission can approve up to 7 days consecutive in a row, and the chiefs are asking for 5. So that's why we're here.
And I would add, Commissioners, in the past, we have done it without formal commission action. If Robert came to me tomorrow and the commission wasn't planned to meet, I wouldn't want to necessarily call an emergency meeting for it. What we've done in that situation is that Robert and I have consulted with the chair. The chair has executed the burn ban, and then we notify everyone in that situation and then put it on next week's agenda to just sort of communicate what happened in that situation. When Robert and Jillian came to me today, it's Wednesday, let's just bring it to the commission and have the conversation.
And that's a good point. There's 2 ways. One would be this way as a motion. The second way would be we could ask for an emergency declaration. So that's the place that Sarah's talking about, the emergency declaration.
Perfect. Thanks. Sarah, you knew exactly where I was going. I just like to talk out the process and know that this is something that has happened before, and depending on the day of the week that the request is made determines whether or not it becomes a public item on our commission agenda. Will you mention the burn hotline which website is a good place to go to for daily information about sort of the limitations and specifications of a burn ban, like Commissioner Willie asked?
Right. So our website, Douglas County Emergency Management, pretty easy to find, or the Douglas County website, you can link to our website. It has all that information there, as well as the phone number to call. And then pretty easy process for anybody that's going to check the status and needs to log a burn. So
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to issue a burn ban from October 20th through October 24th for the unincorporated areas of Douglas County due to current dry conditions, forecasted dangerous fire weather and equipment repairs, and responder fatigue from recent grass fire responses.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thanks, Robert. We'll move on to our regularly scheduled agenda. And we've got a couple items from the planning department. We have Kyle Kobe with us for both of them.
We'll move Kyle into the panel.
Hello, sorry, just checking to make sure everybody can hear me real quick.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you very much. This is Kyle Kobe with the Planning Department. Excuse me, this first application proposes establishing a conditional use permit for an event center public assembly use at 1558 North 600 Road. The structure that the use would take place in is already on site and has been converted into a recreational space used by the owner. The conditional use permit is being sought in order to open up the property to public events. The proposed changes to the property include the addition of gravel parking areas on the northeast side of the barn structure, as well as a concrete parking area and sidewalk on the southwest side of the structure. The grass overflow and/or outdoor event area is shown on the site plan as well. The applicant has also noted that outdoor lighting would be added around the parking area to the northeast. They have submitted additional information for these lights, and they'll be reviewed for compliance with the lighting standards in the Douglas County zoning code prior to final approval. This property is zoned AG2, Transitional Agricultural District, and all surrounding properties are zoned the same or AG1, as shown in Figure 2 of your staff report. The area is primarily characterized by residential and/or agricultural uses, though there are several non-residential uses located nearby as well, as shown in Figure 3 in your staff report. An event venue is located along North 600 Road to the west. An equipment storage use is located to the south on East 1550 Road, and 2 commercial greenhouse uses are located to the east along North 600 Road. The recommended conditions of approval are included in the staff report. I touched on the condition related to lighting earlier. There's also a condition stipulating that any signage must comply with sign code requirements, and any events exceeding 100 guests or any outdoor event that includes sound amplification would require a special event permit through Douglas County zoning and codes. The last condition is related to the gravel parking area. Since new parking is proposed on the site, the provisions of section 12-311-3.02 come into play, which state that non-residential uses require paved surfacing for parking areas and driveway. On September 26th, the Planning Commission discussed this item and voted unanimously to forward a recommendation for approval. And on October 17th, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved the variance request associated with this application, subject to certain conditions. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I believe the applicant was intending to join via Zoom tonight. I hope they were able to make it. They may be present in person as well. I'm not sure.
Can you give us the
Thanks,
applicant's
Kyle.
name, Kyle?
Yeah, what's the applicant's name?
It
It's online.
might be Alan or Beth.
Alan, we're going to try to move you into the panel. There we go.
Welcome, Alan. You're welcome to provide any additional comments that you'd like to at this time.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. No, thank you. I appreciate all the work that the county staff has done and the team getting us to this point. Really no need to really restate what's in the staff report. We've got an event space out here that we've probably spent the last 2.5 years just kind of pouring our heart and soul into and just as a place for our own. We're very proud of it. It is very close to our home. It's just, 100 yards or less from our home. So we're right in the same vicinity. And we're really more interested in the smaller, not so frequent events. We're not really looking for, this isn't going to be our full-time job. We have other jobs, but just something to open it up to the public to share the space with that we're so proud of occasionally. And that's really kind of the level of effort that we've put into it. We're anxious to invite others to enjoy it, and hopefully as much as we do. We're really on board with everything that the staff has recommended, have no concerns. We do plan to comply with all the requirements there, and look forward to working with everybody. Open to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Well, I've got a question for you, Kyle. So there was a section about time limits and the fact that this was a sort of lower impact use. Staff was recommending that there not necessarily be time limits, even though there often are to CUPs. So I think I have a two-part question. One, can you help give us some contrast between this one, events fewer than 100 people versus other event centers in the unincorporated area, and what type of capacity those CUPs might have, and any time limits we've maybe put on them, if you have that readily available. And then I'm just curious if you can also give me examples of other CUPs that do not have a time limit attached to them. Those questions.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah, so sure. I think I've got those captured. You're right that the staff was not recommending a time limit on this one due to the scope and the scale. It is a little bit of every single application is reviewed within its own context. I don't know that I could give you a bright red line over which we would have said we're recommending a 10-year time limit or something like that. I would say that that's probably the most common time limit that we place on these, like a 10-year approval deadline and then like a 5-year review. Just kind of looking around, it really was a scope and a scale kind of a thing. If this would have been maybe twice the size or something like that, or they were proposing significant outdoor amplification or something like that, we might have something along those lines. But the other component to that was there are enforcement mechanisms that are in place just through code enforcement and things of that nature. I don't have a comprehensive list of other CUPs that do not have time limits attached. I know that that is a common practice, but from time to time there are conditional use permits that don't warrant them. But I don't have a list to provide you of other examples along those lines.
Sure, that's okay. I didn't, it helps to know that it's a somewhat common practice, and I appreciate that it's maybe in the context of each application, but in my experience thus far in the county commission, I can't recall a CUP so far in my tenure, which hasn't been that long yet, that hasn't had some type of time limit. So this one, that piece of this one surprised me a little bit. So I'm curious to hear thoughts or questions from other commissioners also, or staff.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add that too, Kyle. In my experience, this is not common to not have a time limit. Not that it's not okay, but I wouldn't call it common. And I guess I want to, and you mentioned code enforcement as the operation of like how to enforce some of these things and related to, I'm also concerned about noise and other issues. There's no hours of operation condition on this, is there? And what happens, what would be the route if the county begins to get concerns from neighbors that they would go through to address that?
Yeah, so sorry, Calco with planning. I think I might have misspoken earlier. I think I intended to state that it is most common that there is a time limit
Got it.
on these. I probably said it the other way around. I apologize for that. In my comment regarding code enforcement was not necessarily, I guess, just in terms of the operation of these types of uses. I think my understanding of the intent of those time limits of approval is to reevaluate. Over time we have some data that has been gathered to see if it makes sense to continue on. Where if there are issues that arise, they would come about through if noise ordinances were violated or something along those lines. There would be I guess standard enforcement mechanisms. I can't really speak to how those are administered or the process that would come into play. I would defer to Douglas County Zoning and Code staff on that. I know that early on in the review process, that was a discussion point that we had. We did discuss a time limit, and this one didn't rise to that level in this particular instance, but it is something that could be added at this stage if the commission so chose, for sure.
Mr. Commissioner Kelly, and a question for the applicant then, I think that begs, Alan, if we added a condition of a 10-year review, and we could even add, we'd have to see commissioners, we could even add a 10-year review that then could be permanent in place, that after 10 years, we could then say, if it's a positive review, we could move it forward. Alan, do you have any concerns about that?
No, I don't. I mean, I would assume that the proper reminders will be sent out because I'm sure I'll forget by then, but that's not a problem. I mean, our intent here, we're good friends with all of our neighbors and we want to stay that way. And so if there's things that we need to adjust, I'm hopeful that we'll know that long before it becomes an issue of that's brought to any level at the county, because we talk to them on an almost daily basis. So but I'm good with that. We want to do everything we can to be a good member of our community and our neighborhood here.
Thanks, Alan. I've seen a few CUPs in my time, and everyone's intent is to always work with their neighbors, but we want to have something in
Sure.
place that allows for a review and to come back and to make sure we're good on that. Commissioner.
Understood.
This is Commissioner Willie. Kyle, can you confirm North 600 Road is a paved road in this section of the county? That is correct? So that is one of the things that we have. Kyle, are you confirming that?
Yep, correct.
Okay. So that is one of the things that makes this an easier fit for a gathering space. However, in my time of seeing CUPs, I have seen very few, and certainly that have no time limit on them, or hours of operation, or occupancy, or frequency of uses that would be there. I'm struggling with why this is so different from other gathering spaces that we've seen before in the unincorporated area. I'm uncomfortable that we don't have some mechanisms for neighbors to fall back on, short of a Douglas County Sheriff's Department complaint, which is all that's left if we don't have anything tied to the conditional use permit. I think that's a setup for not only this applicant, but future homeowners there who would also have the same CUP.
This Commissioner Kelly, I think there was a question embedded there that I want to give Kyle a chance to respond to. Yeah, well, not so much about the road, but why this one, what I heard you say was, why is this one so special that we don't have those, traditional restrictions in place? Is that what I heard you say?
Kyle Kelly with planning. I guess when I was doing my analysis and when we were putting together our recommendations, we were just evaluating this one. I was not coming at it from the perspective of, like that is a hard and fast rule. And I don't mean that to communicate that as that's necessarily what I'm hearing. It just, in this particular context, in my review, and as we were discussing it didn't seem to rise to that level. But at the same time, we kind of account for, through the public hearing process and hearing at these public meetings, if there are additional stipulations or conditions or restrictions that we should place on it, we absolutely can. The staff recommended conditions are just in some ways a starting point. So I can absolutely update the resolution to include any additional stipulations. I don't have any particular issue with that. I don't have a matrix necessarily that I used to determine why this one was special per se. So much as just in my review, it did not, sorry, the lights are going off on me here. It didn't warrant it in my mind, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't need it.
addressing kind of my other commissioners here, I would be most comfortable if the applicant and staff were able to work out conditions that they would like to propose rather than have us on the fly come up with something that may be especially restricting. And this is an unusual space for me. I'm usually asking for fewer restrictions for CUPs so that businesses can operate in the way that they need to. That's why I'm aware that this one is so unusual.
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner Willie, if we're gonna add time limits on and I think it requires a deferment, let that go back to the applicant and the planning department to see if they can work something out. Typically, Alan, these things can get worked out pretty easy. It's just, where those are and then, boy, we keep losing Kyle. We can, just tell us where you think those time limits should be. We can bring that back to the commission for approval. So if that's where other commissioners are, I'm fine with that.
So are you looking more for hours of operation? Is that what you're?
The short list I have here, and I think staff could be more helpful with that, and they're intended to be limitations that work with your business and not against your business. However, it also gives the neighbors kind of a stopgap if something isn't going according to plan. And that would be occupancy, hours of operation, frequency, and a time limit. Those are the things I had on my list. At this point, you can have up to 99 people as often as you want, as late as you want. And especially since we don't have specific letters of support from neighbors, the nearest neighbor that has the driveway nearby, Dr. Jones didn't weigh in on this at all. So there's just not enough here to make me comfortable with a CUP with no limits and no restrictions. And I would ask, sorry, if I can follow on, either Sarah or Kyle, can you explain what the timeline would be for Alan to come back? Because this wouldn't have to go back to the planning department, that would just come back through the Board of County Commissioners. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. And Kyle can correct me on that. So it would just basically be the amount of time that Kyle could work with the applicant and engage with county zoning and code staff and get it back on an agenda pretty quickly. As long as it doesn't have to go back to planning commission. Is that correct, Kyle?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't see any reason why this would need to go back to planning commission unless specifically directed for additional discussion there.
And I appreciate Kyle, I think the desire to try to keep limitations as just consistent with what we've done in the past, so not overly burdensome. And just as a reminder for folks that, one of the things I think is different between the county and the city when these kinds of things come up is, the county doesn't have a code in the sense like it's for enforcement purposes quite the same way as inside a city. So when there's, we have a noise ordinance, but that's enforced through district court. So it's a much different process sometimes. So I think sometimes having conditions that zoning and codes can use in a CUP application provides us some additional avenues to just make sure things stay consistent with what everybody's envisioning as they go along. That it's different inside a city where there's a whole bunch of neighbors and you have a whole city code that has to stay in compliance with.
So if I may, just as we're discussing this with the applicant, in terms of time limit of approval, I think I heard like the 10-year time limit is the commission's kind of in general support of that. Just trying to get some parameters for when we're
No, I
discussing.
appreciate that, Kyle. I think that might be true. However, I'd want to just pause a little bit because we still need to open this item up for public comment and bring it back for kind of a final decision and direction from us this evening. So I think before we go, unless there's other specific questions from commissioners, I guess I just have one clarifying question for you, Commissioner Willie. I had also wondered about the hours of operation and thought that was probably a pretty reasonable request to ask to be worked out. When you mention occupancy, are you thinking about a maximum number of people for those special event permits that would be required for anyone over one or any event over 100 people? Is that what you're thinking of, or is there something more specific about the occupancy issue?
So right now, if there are 100 people, that it's a special permit from the county, and that I don't have any issue with. I think that's across the board. But right now, there are no restrictions other than that. So then the upper number is 99 people with no other restrictions on it. So I don't have a particular number to suggest. I think that staff can work with Alan and his business to decide what is likely to propose. But there are a lot of CUPs out there for event spaces that I think could be used as a guide to make sure that we're not being out of line for this particular one.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment before further discussion. Does anybody here wish to make public comment about this item? Go ahead and please come forward. When you get up to the microphone, press the button until you see the green light, and then you're ready to talk.
Yeah, my name is Walt Clogston. I'm a Lawrence resident. Just a question. I wasn't listening to every comment, but has there been any indication what sorts of events may be here? I mean, at all?
So, well, just a reminder, we can ask staff to address that question. Do you have any further questions? We don't
That's my
usually,
only question. Just
that's the
was
only
wondering
question?
What the events may be, what range? just
Okay.
For interest.
after public comment, we can ask staff to
Well,
address
thank you
that.
very
Thank
much.
you. Anybody else here wish to make public comment about this item? Okay, seeing no hands in the room, double check for virtual hands on Zoom. All right, go ahead and bring this back for discussion. Kyle, did you hear that question from public comment and are you able to address it?
Kyle Kobe with planning. I heard the question. My understanding is the general concept is that it'd be weddings and birthday parties, things of that nature. I think I would open this up to the applicant if there's additional information on the kinds of events that he's intending to open this property up for.
Yeah, certainly weddings would be an option. Small, family reunion or a birthday party. Could also open this up. The space would be conducive to if a company wanted to have a company meeting or a holiday party out here under 100 people. We would entertain that option as well. It's again, given the proximity to our home, we're looking for more kind of controlled, contained, calmer events is what we're looking to host under 100 people.
Great, thank you for those responses. This Commissioner Reed again. I agree with fellow commissioners that to have staff just work on this a little bit more and put some parameters in place. Or I do personally believe that a 10-year time limit is a good idea, and it's a bit more in continuity with other CUPs and provides the opportunity to adjust things if necessary. Or I like Commissioner Kelly's idea that there may be some possibility to make it a sort of permanent CUP after that time, assuming that the review is a positive one and no adjustments need to be made. And then I think it sounds to me, Kyle, like you sort of recaptured the issues brought up before, but what I heard are some more discussion around occupancy and time limits or hours of operation rather. Did I miss one other thing, Commissioner Willie? Frequency of events. So I think it sounds to me like some more work on that and then bring this back in a matter of however long it takes to bring that back before the commission. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I'd just like to address the applicant, this Commissioner Kelly, and give Alan a chance if he wants to ask any more questions or things like that. Alan, I will say that this is as much of the time period and frequency and time limits are really as much a protection for you, the applicant, as it is for the community, because then you can be really clear with your neighbors when they come and say, hey, are you going to be here till 10 o'clock at night? And you'll say, yes, I am. And I have the approval of the county to do that. And so it doesn't become a big question at the time of what are the limits there. And so while it may feel a bit restraining, I'd encourage you to work with Kyle to do something that you feel good about and bring that back to us. And it provides a little bit of protection for you in case neighbors, and I know they're all great neighbors right now, but you might have a new neighbor move in within 10 years. And you just want to be real clear with that. So just want to give you an opportunity to comment and ask any questions.
No, certainly, and I would agree. It's probably best to remove any ambiguity. I'll work with Kyle here this week, and I'm sure we can quickly iron that out. And I don't have any concerns there, and hopefully get this across the finish line at the next meeting.
Mr. Michaels, I can ask one more question. I always do like to ask if we are deferring an item, does that have an impact, an immediate impact on your business? Do you have an event or something that is planned that this timeline of taking a couple weeks to get back on the schedule would be a problem?
No.
Thank you.
I'm happy to make a motion. That's okay with commissioners. First, I want to thank Mr. Michaels for opening a business in Douglas County. We appreciate that. I think sometimes in all these, we forget to thank people for that. So I appreciate you and your wife taking that on. I'll make a motion to defer CUP 22-00161 and ask staff to work with the applicant to determine a time period for the CUP, hours of operation, and frequency. Kyle, does that give you what you need?
Would you also like occupancy standards?
I'm gonna see if anybody wants to amend my motion. I'm actually fine with the 100% occupancy. And then if they need more than that, it would be a special use permit, but I'll put my motion there. We'll need to second it. And then if anybody wants to amend it.
I would second the motion as it is, with the idea that Kyle, you'll be working with the applicant to kind of and look back over other CUPs to make some conditions that match. So we can have further discussions, but I think the closer that you get to some of the things we've talked about tonight, the faster this will go. So I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Michaels, for being here. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Kyle, I believe you're next for another CUP. Go ahead.
That's correct. Kyle Kobe again with Planning Department. This is CUP 22-00244, a conditional use permit application for equipment storage heavy use at 1603 East 779 Road. Two previous conditional use permits have been approved on this property for the proposed use. The most recent one being CUP 030206. That CUP is expired. So while the proposed use and conditions are the same as in the previous CUP, this is technically a new CUP and not a renewal of the previous one. The conditional use permit site plan notes the existing conditions of the property and denotes where specific uses are located. The southern portion of the property is generally used for agricultural purposes. The northern portion is used for residential purposes, and the use in question for the CUP is in the middle. The site plan shows berms on the west and south sides of the equipment yard and parking area. The existing shop structure is located on the east side of the parking area. No changes to the existing conditions, scope of use, or conditions of approval from the previous conditional use permit are proposed with this application. The subject property is zoned AG2, which permits equipment storage heavy use with a conditional use permit. As you can see in figure 2 of the staff report, the surrounding zoning is primarily either AG1 or AG2, though there is GB General Business District zoning to the west at the intersection of Highway 40 and North 1600 Road. The existing conditions of the property, as noted on the site plan, are compliant with density and dimensional standards. The majority of the surrounding area is characterized by residential and agricultural uses. However, there are other non-residential uses located nearby, as you can see in figure 3 of your staff report. These include Water Tower and Kanwaka Township Hall directly to the south, 2 commercial uses nearby to the west along Highway 40, and a Christmas tree farm to the east along Highway 40. In addition to the comments noted in your packet, prior to the Planning Commission meeting, I spoke on the phone with 2 other nearby property owners who expressed opposition to the proposed conditional use permit. I haven't heard anything since the Planning Commission meeting. One other note regarding the address of the property, it is a bit unusual, but the address for the proposed use is correct in that it shows as being addressed off of East 779 Road, though the house on the rear of the property is addressed off of Highway 40. So those addresses are kind of flipped from what you would expect, but it is addressed correctly. On September 26th of the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission discussed this item and voted unanimously to forward a recommendation for approval. That concludes my presentation on this item. I believe that the owner of the property might be in the room, and I believe that David Hamby might be participating via Zoom.
David, I see that you're moved over as a panelist. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, this is David Hamby with BG Consultants representing the applicant. I appreciate staff's work on this. Kyle has worked on this quite a bit on trying to get everything wrapped up. And I think he's presented it well. The Planning Commission didn't have any questions or issues, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And the owner's also there, I believe. So if you have any questions for the owner, he'd be able to answer those as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sloan, are you here? Would you like to provide any additional comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. No, I think Kyle's done a good job. I do want to commend him for how well he worked with my wife and I. We don't do this on a regular basis, and he was very supportive. And the tenant at that property is a single owner operator, so we don't have lots of traffic, employees coming and going. Yes, there were two neighbors who complained during the pandemic. Basically, we didn't monitor the tenant and as closely as we do now, because we were more interested in trying to keep him afloat. And he was storing rocks, other materials in one of our agricultural fields. As soon as we were alerted, the neighbors did not contact us, but as soon as Kyle did, worked with the tenant to get all that removed and cleaned up, and he knows that that's not acceptable going forward. And since my wife and I live immediately west of that site, we drive past it every day. We're monitoring it very closely. And I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for being here.
Do any of you have questions while I'm standing here?
I do not have any questions. Any questions from other commissioners?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. And Mr. Sloan, I do appreciate the letter that was in the packet and your comments at both the Planning Commission meeting and this evening, and just acknowledging and taking responsibility for what happened over the past couple of years and working with staff to really rectify the situation once it was brought to your attention. So I appreciate that very much. Do we have any questions for Kyle on this one? Commissioner Willie?
I first need to disclose that I did have a conversation with Mr. Sloan about this item. Nothing that is not in the packet that's germane to this. As far as questions, I don't have any at the moment. I would like to just make the comment that this is also off of a paved road. This is off of Highway 40. Sometimes we see these heavy equipment storage, and the more difficult question is, can the township roads handle the traffic for that, or the kind of traffic we have? And there are no concerns in this regard for that. I also would like to point out how unusual it is to have so many positive comments from neighbors. And I always appreciate when people take the time to write in support of something, especially for a neighbor and a business owner. So even though there were letters in opposition, there were a great many that were in favor. And this is a use that is appropriate for the site that is being asked.
All right, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to provide public comment on this item? All right, seeing no hands, check online. All right. Got no public commenters on this item, so bring it back for discussion. Thanks for your comments, Commissioner Willie. I agree, and just appreciate always seeing a process of, this is a sort of continuation of similar and same use, but with some conditions and with what seems like has been a really good line of communication between the applicant and property owners and the staff, as well as neighbors. So I am supportive of this and believe that it'll be successful moving forward.
Sure, Kelly, I'm supportive of it as well, but I want to take the opportunity to ask Sarah. We get a lot of these equipment storage CUPs in the unincorporated area, and in the past we've discussed is there a plan going forward? And I don't know if zoning and codes and our planning department has had a chance to look at that yet.
And I'd invite Tanya Voigt, who is in the panel, to talk about this. Yeah, this is an ongoing issue. I have had some conversations with Jeff Crick about some different ways to approach this issue. And I don't think I have an answer for you yet. My understanding, Tanya, was that Jeff was hoping some of the development code conversations could be revised to have some conversations about that. But I think that was more about development in the city, not necessarily about how that impacts the unincorporated area as it comes through. So, Tanya, I guess I want to, if the commission would like a more detailed presentation on the number of equipment storage and kind of contractor businesses and how that works between home-based business and equipment storage, I think that's something staff could work on. Tanya?
Yeah, hi, Commissioners. Tanya Voigt, Zoning and Codes Director. I do think we're kind of at a point where Karen Willie's right, because this situation is on a paved road, that certainly helps our situation quite a lot. When these are located on township roads, a lot of times there's a lot of discussion about the infrastructure, the added traffic, dust palliative, those type of things. And those conversations become much more difficult on township roads. We are working on updating our home-based business regulations. Part of that is probably will not change much for heavy equipment storage. We believe it will still require a conditional use permit because the impacts can be so great with heavy truck traffic. But we are hoping to make some of our home-based businesses more streamlined and more administrative so that the Planning Commission and County Commission aren't seeing quite so many applications. And making it just a little bit easier on entrepreneurial small businesses in the county that have a lower impact. Sarah's right, when it comes to the land development code, a lot of the conversation has been mostly centered around businesses that are located within the city limits right now and them moving out into the county. And we do have a small list of those since COVID that were located in the city limits and are now trying to run home-based businesses or conditional use permits out in the county. Some of that has to do with space available, the types of zoning in the city limits, or just high costs of commercial and industrial zoning in the city limits. So we are having those conversations at a higher level with that land development code. I don't think we have any answers at this time, but we do regularly keep track of how many home businesses we have, how many conditional use permits we have, and the numbers are pretty great. We have close to 400 home-based businesses. We have over 300 conditional use permits in the county. So it does require some, follow-up resource time, just continual checking in, checking on those expiration dates and those reviews. And we use those reviews as a tool to bring those back if the impacts have gotten greater or if we're having problems with neighbors.
Tanya, as you probably well know, I'm very excited for the larger discussion on rural home businesses and what is appropriate and what isn't, and what helps entrepreneurs get started, and then at what point those need to move to an industrial space. I do think that some of that discussion will be linked with the Lawrence Land Development Code discussion, especially some businesses that have been specifically pushed out of Lawrence by codes and then occur in the rural areas, though they may not be appropriate there and serve solely or nearly solely clients within the city of limits of Lawrence. So I'm glad those discussions are ongoing. I'm very excited to have those in the public sphere when we get the chance. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Kelly, and here. Yes, I'm ready to have that discussion. But one thing I would ask Tanya is that when we do have that discussion, that Jeff Crick is here so we can talk about that overlap, because I agree with Commissioner Willie. Some of it is happening because of the codes within the city. We've seen a lot and heard it here. Like, I can't find space in the city. I can't meet the conditions in the city. And so let's move it out to the unincorporated area. And why we want to be accommodating, I think we have to recognize the impacts that it has to our residents in the unincorporated area and the impacts to the infrastructure we have in that unincorporated area.
Appreciate both your points. Any other questions for staff at this time or clarifying points? Otherwise, I'd be ready for a motion.
Make a motion to approve conditional use permit CUP 22-00244 for equipment storage heavy use at 1603 East 779 Road, based on the finding of facts found in the body of the staff report and subject to conditions listed in the staff report, and adopt the resolution.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sloan, for being here. Thank you, Kyle and Tanya. With that, we'll move on to item 4.3. Funding for Burt Nash CCBHC mobile response teams. It looks like Bob Transky's coming up to introduce this item.
I have two purposes, one to introduce this item and two to let my colleague Stephen O'Neill pull up his PowerPoint presentation so that when I turn the microphone over to him, he is ready to go. Good evening, everyone. Bob Tryansky, Director of Behavioral Health Projects. It's a great pleasure to be here. If you were here with us last week, if you've been reading the paper, if you are living in Douglas County, Kansas, it is a lively time to be talking about behavioral health projects. Last week, we talked about the status, the operating status of the TRC, and there are ongoing conversations about that. But one of the sets of questions we received from commissioners was to talk about the TRC's progress in the context of the entire behavioral health system of care. So we've shown, and I'm sure my colleague is going to show you that graphic again of the behavioral health crisis system in Douglas County. Tonight, we want to talk about one component of that crisis system, really two, because they're really integrated in serious and significant ways, and that is mobile teams. In October of 2020, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council formed a work group, and that work group was charged and tasked with beginning to pull together community stakeholders to look at our existing mobile response capacity. And at that point, the existing mobile response capacity is the co-responder unit between the partnership between Lawrence Police Department and Burt Nash. But that work group was convened and facilitated by Stacy Cooper from Heartland RADAC and by Monica Kurse from Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters. We looked at models for mobile response. We discussed estimates for volumes, et cetera, et cetera. And that work group came back with two recommendations, which they shared with the commission over the last couple of years. The first recommendation was that Douglas County needed a 24/7 professionally staffed mobile crisis line. And that is something that our partners from Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters have helped us to realize that aspiration, and that came online in July of this year. And then the second piece of the puzzle is mobile teams. At the time we had the discussions, and when we brought back the recommendations from the work group, the recommendation was to pilot a mobile team that would be available in evening hours and weekends in sort of coordination with when the front doors of the TRC would be closed. So obviously crisis doesn't rest after Friday at 5 p.m. We needed a 24/7 robust behavioral health crisis response system. So at that point, Burt Nash had not yet started the process of becoming a CCBHC, a Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic. Since that time, because Burt Nash has been successful in achieving that designation, the CCBHC structure both requires and offers opportunities to realize a 24/7 mobile response team. So the presentation tonight by Burt Nash is going to share with you what Burt Nash is doing with mobile response. Burt Nash's aspiration and requirement as a CCBHC is to get to a 24/7 mobile response. In order to get to a 24/7 mobile response, with the funding models you'll see tonight, there is a significant gap between what Medicaid funds leveraged through the CCBHC can support and what additional resources would be needed to achieve 24/7 support. The exciting thing for me is that I think we, as a work group and as partners, came over a year ago with an idea that we might be able to have a team that served 40 hours a week. And Burt Nash, through their work and the modeling that Stephen's going to share, and the really dedicated work of Edie Harrison and the mobile team from Burt Nash, and also Jared Otten and Steve DeVore, and all the work that's being done at KSPHQ, we now have a mobile team that is serving the community from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And there's a path forward here, which they'll share with you of how to get 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. And then engage in additional conversations throughout the community and with other funding partners, resources, foundations. How do we get to 24/7? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. I've talked too much, but I think I am as excited about this proposition as he is. I get it. Yeah, good question. Sarah, how do we get this?
Oh, through the Zoom.
Here we go.
Thank you. I don't.
Just the one little, the like underscore line in the top left corner of the thumbnail box. Jared's got it.
Jared's got it.
I don't think it's gonna.
Same deal. Know why it is not. That's fine. We'll deal with it. We'll make it work, I think. Yep, we'll make it work. It does not. It's not cooperating. All right, we'll make this work. All right. Commissioners, thank you for having us. I'm Stephen O'Neill. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Burt Nash, and I'm hoping not to do most of the talking here. I'm primarily here to answer questions about the funding model or CCBHC. I do want to start by thanking Bob and Sarah and Jill. In the time I've been in this community, we've worked on a lot of things. And I'm really pleased tonight to be here with something that is operational and is working and is helping our community. And I want to thank the county staff and leadership for the support. And I want to thank a couple of the partners that showed up tonight. Steve DeVore from Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters. They are a critical piece of this, and my colleague, Dr. George Thompson, who is leading our efforts over at the TRC. He didn't have to be here, so thank you, George, for coming and offering your support. And probably most importantly, we actually have members of our mobile response team here tonight. So if you guys could just stand up, I just want to acknowledge you and the work that you've put in to making this team a reality. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jared Otten and to Edie Harrison. I've worked with Edie almost 20 years, and I think very highly of her, and I think our community's lucky to have her. And Jared, while he no longer works for Burt Nash, was in my new employee orientation at Burt Nash my first day, and I'm so proud to stand up here with him and to see the value that he's bringing to our community.
Great, thank you. My name is Edie Harrison, and I thank you, Stephen and Bob, and you guys for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it. And thank you, County Commissioners, for taking up this important matter and your time this evening. I really appreciate that too. So as you see on the first slide, it's just basically a rundown of how we've worked. And I've only been in this position since January of 2022. But over the last year, As my role in program manager, I've been fortunate to work in collaboration with many community partners, most especially KSHEQ. Sorry, I can't even talk. KSPHQ. And Jared and I meet weekly, and we've worked really hard on developing a referral process whereby community partners, law enforcement, and other individuals that might be in crisis can connect with our mobile response team. Since February, my team has also been able to provide support in the role as co-responder with the Lawrence Mental Health Team. And we continue to work closely with them, and the co-responder is actually on our team. So we have weekly meetings with the mental health team at Lawrence Police Department. As we move forward, we will continue to work closely with our partners to provide crisis support and access to other services in the least restricted environment, while providing a mental health response to persons in crisis rather than a law enforcement response, but also working hand in hand with law enforcement and EMS to make sure that people that are experiencing the crisis can receive it in the community without going to a higher level of care like LMH or potentially the state hospital. So the next one.
This is a graphic that's been up on this screen a lot over the last few years, but I think what's important to note here is how important each step along this continuum is. Our mobile team allows us to support our friends, our family, our neighbors, where they live, where they work, where they play, so that we can help them find the next right, safe space. And hopefully most of the time, that is where they're at or in their home, and we can avoid hospitalization or other higher levels of care.
My name is Jared Otten, and I'm the Crisis Line Director at KSPHQ. My role tonight would be to just highlight some of the work Edie and I have done over the past several months. Some of the community partners are those listed on the PowerPoint. Others include Lawrence Douglas County Public Health and LMH Health Primary Care Clinics, to highlight some of the work that we're undertaking with those two entities. LMH and Lawrence Douglas County Public Health are engaged in the zero suicide implementation process, which many agencies, healthcare and behavioral healthcare agencies, are engaged in currently. So they've set out to improve care for their patients as they navigate suicide pathways of care. That's included trying to tie in their patients to the crisis care continuum. So setting up a process for patients to, when they screen at moderate to high risk for suicide, being able to connect immediately with the Douglas County Crisis Line operated by KSPHQ. Ideally being able to address those needs and concerns over the phone. Setting them up with referrals to outpatient behavioral health or other human service providers, but also then having access to the mobile response team. So those are two examples of work that's being undertaken to try to connect people quickly to the crisis line and the mobile response team if it's needed. Others include work with KU to serve students and some of the unique needs of that population, as well as other universities, including Haskell and Baker. The Lawrence Public Library is exploring some strategies to utilize the Douglas County Crisis Line for patrons of the library. And the mobile response team is looking at what occupying that space and just being among community members might look like to increase access for people who might be experiencing a mental health crisis. And then finally, the intensive care coordination program offered by Heartland RADAC it will play a key role in helping people navigate the behavioral health crisis system in Douglas County. And so we're working on connecting callers when they reach out, as well as people who are served by the mobile response team. And then I think another hope tonight is to begin the process of educating the public about how to access some of these services that are being provided, that are available today. This, while it's not very visible, just provides an example of how a caller may be connected to the mobile response team. They would reach out through our existing number, which has been our number for over 50 years, 785-841-2345.
Ideally, a person's crisis or whatever they're struggling with would be addressed over the phone. If there is a need for an in-person support, or if someone wishes to request that, we will refer that individual or the person who's concerned about someone else to the mobile response team. There will be a brief referral process to gather information, giving ED's team what they need in order to have a safe response and a safe outcome. We're also working on a 911 call diversion program. We have meetings scheduled with Douglas County Emergency Communications to figure out what that process is going to look like and how it can best serve law enforcement agencies. Most of the time, an individual's needs will be met over the phone. And in rare circumstances, we may need to involve law enforcement. And it's really critical to have alternatives to law enforcement responses. In the first days or since going live on September 11th, the mobile team was operating prior to that, but in their current capacity from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We've had 8 contacts referred to the mobile response team. 7 of those referrals were requests by law enforcement. And we think that shows that initially law enforcement see this as valuable and as an alternative to incarceration and other and hospitalization. 3 of the 8 were after 5 p.m. and 1 of 8 was on the weekend. So we're still gathering some data on what utilization will look like, and we hope that in many months we can report on what that utilization looks like.
Thank you, Jared. So actually, this is kind of a slide that talks about what a mobile response looks like after we get the referral. One of the main parts of that is that that our team is staffed with a variety of mental health workers. We have licensed clinicians, crisis case managers, and peers, which are persons with lived experience. And we always go out in teams of 2 for safety. The referral process will also identify any kind of safety issues that are present in the community or at the home of the person or just in the community. Right now, we are able to respond within 15 to 30 minutes. Our plan is to not take longer than 60 minutes. As we get busier, we'll make sure that response time stays below an hour. That's evidence-based to provide that service within an hour. We are in talks with HQ that, oftentimes their call counselor will stay on the phone until we get there, or we'll continue to update the person that's in a crisis or a family member of our time arrival. We are also tasked, one of the main things I think that's important is that we are tasked with continuing to serve the person and help them access the services they need or the resources they need to further mitigate, hopefully, any more crisis. Oftentimes it might not be based in like a suicide prevention or just a crisis could be anything for somebody. They don't have enough money to pay their rent. They don't have any food. They got an eviction letter. So our plan is to continue to work with that person until they've connected to that service that's perfect for them or that will help them meet those needs that caused them to become in a crisis initially. And the least restrictive environment and help them live independently in the community with the resources that we can help them find.
One of the things that we're really committed to is a high level of accountability and transparency around this and really any of our initiatives. So we will work with Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters and Bert Nash and all the other partners to regularly be feeding back information to this commission and the general public. Actually, as part of our CARF accreditation, Bert Nash will be publishing all of our accountability indicators and outcome indicators, no matter how they look, which I think will create some really critical discussion and opportunities for improvement and also opportunities to highlight the things that are going well. This is not an exhaustive list of data that we will collect, but these are some examples of things that we can collect and report out on to the community. But I just felt it was important to acknowledge how important it is to communicate regularly with the community about how this is going and to get feedback about how it's going. We'll be talking a lot about integrated funding, I hope, as a community into the future, but mobile response is an example of where it's critically important to have not just integrated programming, but also integrated funding. To make this work, we will be braiding together many funding sources. I did include for the commissioners and the public a comprehensive kind of walkthrough about how the funding model works and could work. I'd love to read every word of that out loud, but I won't. But some of the possible funding sources and actual funding sources we have is the state Medicaid plan tied to the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic model, the state of Kansas Mobile Response for Children Initiative, non-CCBHC Medicaid revenue, commercial insurance revenue, city and county funding is going to be critically important. Federal funding, if we can get it, we have some now, which you probably saw in your packet. And there are certain places where private foundation funding is appropriate. I don't think it's great for ongoing operational funding. But for things like vehicles or sort of needs that aren't all the time, I think it's important to leverage private foundation funding as well. What we are requesting for 22 is a not to exceed $70,000 amount to support our existing 10 FTE mobile response team and to seed an expansion to 2 a.m. as soon as we can do it. We actually have those positions posted. They're really hard or have been historically hard to fill. It's getting a little easier, which I can talk about. But we're collecting applications for that expansion now. So as soon as we can do it, we would move forward with that. Of the 70,000, 50,000 would be to support a Delta on the existing team. And up to 20,000 would be to expand those services, hopefully by December 1st to 2 a.m. So that's our request for 22. As we move forward into 2023, we wanted to provide quite a bit of transparency about what that could look like and what that would look like. There's a lot more information in your packet, and I'm happy to field questions. I think some of the key takeaways here, there are a lot of iterations that we could get to as a community and make work. Financially, the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic model, it takes the cost of whatever the thing is that is approved in our cost report, and it spreads it across the entire Burt-Nash patient population and all of our visits. And that's really important for crisis services, because if you have to fund them on a fee-for-service basis, you can't generate enough funding on that service to cover the cost. So what we do is we spread it across everything else. And we estimate that CCBHC will pay for 56% of whatever the thing is. And in this case, that thing is the mobile response team. So you can see that with the 2 a.m. proposal for 2023, that would leave Burt-Nash with an operational delta of 213,890.81. You'll notice that the Douglas County Health Insurance subsidy is zeroed out there. That is because we still, I think, need to figure out how best to manage our funding request for 23 for the health insurance support. We requested approximately 1.6 million in support. Interestingly, we've grown so much that our actual annual health insurance cost is now $3.6 million a year. But we can talk about that allocation and how to best and where to best apply that. I did not want to presume anything here, which is why that's zeroed out. So you can see the partial expansion leaves a delta of 213. If we were to move to a full expansion, which is not the recommendation tonight, you can see that in 23, that would have a delta of 510,000. And then as we look forward to 24, and this is where conversations, I think, with the rest of the community, the city, other law enforcement entities will be important. In 2024, a couple of important things happen. First, our SAMHSA grant runs out. So we no longer have that $342,000 of support that we will have in 2023. Another big thing is that we will rebase our CCBHC cost reports. We can include things that we've taken on between our current cost report and when we submit that. But we can no longer include new things. So moving forward, we have to take on the expense for the new thing and then get it on the next cost report. Our first cost report, we were able to include things that we didn't have, but we wanted. So that's how we were able to put this in, and the TRC and some of the other community aspirations that we have. So that's kind of where we're at on the money. And with that, I think we would be happy to stand for questions.
Great. Thank you all. We're excited about this and have been hearing some good feedback about it operating. I appreciate you all coming and joining us for this meeting, and really excited about the work that you're doing. It's going to be really critical. My primary question was just, and maybe this is the best question for you, Edie, about the co-responder piece. So I think there was mentioned that there's currently one co-responder. Is that LPD, I presume, or with it, well, Burton Ash employee, but connected to LPD. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you give me and certainly that's the highest volume of calls or, the need. Can you give me a sense of what conversations with other local law enforcement agencies have been and what the potential need for co-responder
I've
in a
had
different
preliminary
department is?
conversations, I'm sorry, with KU Public Safety, and we're going to continue those conversations. I also reached out to the Baldwin Chief of Police as well, not about necessarily the co-responder, but about the role of mobile response to them as well. I mean, of course, because they're Douglas County. I do know that Lawrence Police have put out that they are interested in building their team and hiring more co-responders for Lawrence Police Department. That's what I know so far.
Yes. Bob's got something to add too.
Yeah, I think some of the hope for this presentation is to start to tee up a larger community conversation about this and what it's going to take to support our behavioral health system of care. To that end, our new criminal justice coordinator, Katie Fitzgerald, and we met with the sheriff and all the chiefs from KU, from Baldwin, Eudora, from Lawrence. And we shared with them that this conversation is one which we would like to take up with CIT Council, for example. I mean, in terms of having questions about what some of the models might be for co-responder units linked to police that would support and back up and be integrated with what we're doing here. So my point just being that we have kind of laid this conversation and we're trying to figure out what the best way to convene and tee up some thoughtful conversation around this is, because it very much is something that if we're going to achieve an aspiration, if we have shared purpose of having 24/7 mobile response, there needs to be an integrated approach to supporting that.
Commissioner Reed, I would just add kind of financially, we could make a lot of scenarios work, and what we do now doesn't have to be what we do in the future. I think our goal is to make the investment as soon as we can so that we can retain that expense in our cost report while we have dialogue moving into the future about how best to use the team members that we have and how best to partner with the community. So I think moving forward, there's a lot of opportunity for discussion and flexibility and pivoting as we need to best meet the needs of the community.
Thank you. Questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Willie?
First, I'm excited about the project. I'm excited about the data that we'll collect from it and what we'll learn about our community and how we move forward with it. So I'm very excited to get a chance to talk about it. I have some questions for Edie, if you don't mind. And the first one is,
Sure.
we have a photo of the vehicle there, which is a special response vehicle of some kind. Can you talk to us about it?
That is actually not a photo of our vehicle. That is actually a photo of the oldest mobile response team, which is in Eugene, Oregon. And it's called Cahoots. And so that's a picture that Jared got to put on the slide. So this presentation's been around a few times, so.
Thank you. I did make the assumption that it was ours, but what do you respond in? And does it matter? Is it a specialized vehicle or is it just to transport you there?
Right now, we're utilizing Burt Nash vans and then the team also utilizes their personal cars. But we are hoping that we, at some point, will have a dedicated van to respond in. And the idea is to make sure that it's a working office out in the community. So we'll have Wi-Fi and places for computers and hopefully printer, just kind of deck it out a little bit to provide responses and services in the community and not have to take people back to the office.
Is there any time when you would use that for transporting a patient or a client?
We do transport and if it's a safety issue, we would probably involve law enforcement if it was a question of whether or not somebody needed to go to the hospital involuntarily, but we will transport people to access resources, to detox, to treatment centers, different places in the community that will meet the needs of them in the moment.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
More.
Can we?
So
can
you
we s-
mentioned,
I'm sorry, can we stop sharing? Stephen, while you pose that your question, can you pull that down? Thanks.
so Edie, you mentioned a response time of 15 to 30 minutes, no more than 60.
Mhm.
Is that to anywhere in the county or is there kind of a sphere of where those response times are expected to be? And where do you respond from?
We respond from the 200 main office, and we might office out of headquarters offices on the weekends or in the evenings, especially as we expand to later times and 24/7. And those are just predictions of what we've done so far. Most of our responses have been in East Lawrence, and we haven't been out in the county very much. I anticipate that might come up whenever they have the 911 expansion to where headquarters will answer or some of the calls will be transferred over that are mental health calls. So I'm not really sure how big Douglas County is. I'm not from Douglas County. I apologize. So I should go drive it.
I'm sure you'll get a chance.
Yes.
In the job that you're in.
Yep.
And so in terms of if everyone's responding, from a certain location, from a centralized location, what does take the time for the response other than drive time?
My team will look and see if the person has had any other interactions with Burt Nash. Identify if they already have a treatment team. Contact maybe talk to somebody at KSPHQ and find out if there's anything else that they need to know. Just kind of getting collaborative information before they go out on the call. But we are constantly monitoring, it comes to an email process. So we're constantly monitoring those emails and they're quick to want to go out now and we'll continue to do that. So it's just collaboration, getting in the car basically.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I'm not quite sure who to direct my question to, so I'm gonna toss it out there and see who wants to take it. But, we talk a lot about the right type of care at the right time in the right place, which assumes that now they're getting the wrong type of care in the wrong place at the wrong time. when this system is in place, where do we think we will start to see an impact on the systems that are getting hit now? So like, is that emergency room visits? Is that police calls? Is that, what is that we think we'll see less of?
I think when people access, for example, the crisis line, we would see ideally the diversion from law enforcement and emergency responders. And I think having the stopping point of the mobile response team would also, as someone were to move across that continuum, mobile response team diverting them from the emergency room in many cases. So I think to answer your question, you provided the answer, but emergency room visits ideally would go down. Ideally, we'd also see youth suicide attempts and service connections going up, or sorry, suicide attempts going down, connections to care going up. So I think those are a couple of things that we might be able to monitor.
And just to add to that, like so far, most of our calls have been law enforcement. And in my conversations with law enforcement and the mental health team and other police officers, the types of mental health calls, the calls they get that involve a mental health crisis take up a lot of time and energy on their part. They have to write the reports and oftentimes my team can go out and help de-escalate, identify what kind of resources they need. If somebody goes to the ED to do that, it takes up a lot of time for the emergency room. And then there's no follow-up. So one of the key points is that we'll be able to follow up with these people and continue to meet with them and hopefully avoid the higher levels of care that they're accessing now when they're in a crisis.
So go ahead, Bob.
No, I think this question is also an example of, I'm looking at Jill, because I think as the mobile team comes online and we think about MyRC and Heartland Radek's intensive care coordination team using MyRC and the county's data analyst making referrals to the intensive care coordination team. In the last month, the referrals through MyRC to the intensive care coordination team were twice as great as the referrals coming out of the LMHED. It's just sort of interesting. My point is, I really think this is a sort of a focused project, right? To figure out how the data sharing collaborative and the work of our partners can start to look at those familiar faces, that small group of people who are, adversely impacting the system. And I really feel like, from the beginning, tracking mobile response calls through MyRC and our other data systems. And, as the TRC comes online, linking that data from the TRC, it's as critical to evaluate how volumes to the TRC impact and offset what's happening in the emergency department. So this is going to be an exciting season of building, I think, upon the relationships, those sort of data sharing agreements.
And so that follows up leads to my next question about, what those key performance indicators are. And I saw some that were listed in the work group numbers there. And have you put any thought to, and knowing that it's not a success or failure answer, it's just data, right? It just tells us something. Have you put any thought into including those types of indicators, like how it impacts the system, like correlating the number of mobile response calls that we have and looking at the number? I mean, with My Resource Connection, we're actually able to make some of those connections on an individual basis. Have you thought about putting some of those key performance indicators into place in this agreement?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things that we will look at will be like looking at the folks that we're interacting with through mobile response and what else is happening to them in the system. Are they getting care coordination? Edie mentioned that they would look to see if they're already service involved at Burt Nash. If they're already service involved, it's actually not always the most effective use of the mobile team to respond. They may have a team that we expect to respond, and we have several teams that are equipped to serve people 12, 18, 24 hours a week with really intensive service. Being able to monitor that, being able to monitor are people going to the hospital or not going to the hospital? Bob mentioned the data collaborative. I think we're still learning to understand what power that will have and our ability to take the work that Edie does and feed it into that collaborative and see what comes out with our partners. But what we ought to see is an impact elsewhere in the system. And if we're not seeing that impact, we ought to be talking about that here and elsewhere until we're getting the impact that we want.
Thanks. And just one more question. I think Commissioner Willie's got one more. And I noticed, Sarah, that in our recommendation is to authorize the county administrator to amend the 2022 community partner agreement with Bert Nash. We already have an community partner agreement with Bert Nash now.
Correct. for
Okay.
2022.
And so would some of these key performance indicators be included in that agreement or not?
I think if there are data points that we can identify for the remainder of this year that we can produce, we can certainly add that to the amendment of
Okay.
the agreement. And then have a fuller conversation about resetting that expectation for 2023, what more you're able to produce and what more we can put into that. Bert Nash does give us a pretty robust data set and we review it quarterly with them and in addition to their financials. And I think, it's just a really wealth of information and we can use that to get more info.
I have another question for Edie. Sorry, I'll leave you alone after this. So you talked about connecting people to resources, like looking at what caused the crisis in the first place, the underlying causes, and connecting to resources that could lead to next steps. How long would that kind of case management go on, or do we know yet?
We don't know yet, but it is not time limited. So we will continue to work with them until we can identify the service that they're asking for or the resource that they need and help them attain that. And continue to work with them until they don't want us to work with them anymore, or we hand them off to like RADAC or the intensive case management team or a Bert Nash team potentially, or Heartland Healthcare or LMH, healthcare clinics. So whatever, we don't have any time frame on it.
Okay, so meeting more immediate needs and then handing off to another partner for kind of longer term needs.
That's correct.
Otherwise, I would worry about capacity for your team because the needs are great. So
Yeah.
This Commissioner Reed, to piggyback off that, and I'm making the point to ask the question to help clarify. A couple of people have asked me in individual conversations and raised concerns that if Bert Nash responds, the mobile response team, that they would be required to enroll in Bert Nash services if they weren't already in it. I have had the discussion with people that I have not seen anything that indicates that that's true, but it's come up a few different times. So I just want to reiterate what you just said, Edie, about how those follow-up contacts are about connecting them to the right resources, the right time. Bert Nash might be one of those, but also might not be.
That's correct.
Accurate. Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify that a little bit, we will, like any healthcare service, ask for certain pieces of information, and we will, at least for that service, they don't have to get another service for us, but where we can, we have to try and get payment for the work that we're doing. And it really becomes an equity issue too, because essentially we're charging folks with Medicaid, and we can't charge people with Medicaid and not charge everyone else. And of course, I want to be clear, we have a very generous sliding fee scale at Bert Nash, and we have the ability to completely waive people's fees. And when we do everything we can to work with folks, I just wanted to be transparent and really upfront with that, but there is no expectation that they ever have to speak to us again. And we do right now ask for consent before we go out, and we think that's really important. Consent works a little differently with co-response, but there's no expectation that they have to talk to Edie more than once or even once.
can I ask another follow-up? So I assume, and it's just probably worth stating, that this is a free service up until a point. So I know like when the ambulance comes, that is free until you ride with them and then that gets charged to you. So can you talk just about that? You were talking about a sliding scale, but that's for Bert Nash services as a follow-up. but the mobile response itself is free in the community. Is that correct?
It's not free. So I mean, it's got a significant cost associated with that. And we are, for those folks who have Medicaid, we're billing their Medicaid. It would be free up until the point you consented to treatment. And at that point, just like anywhere you'd get a service, we would charge for that. Did I answer that right, Edie? Yeah, now, again, we are not going to abandon a situation where we are needed, and we don't do that now, whether folks can pay or not, and we're not going to let that get in the way of service. But free is a stronger word than I would use. These are really highly trained, highly educated folks. And they're expensive. You don't have to be ashamed of that. But yes.
So Stephen, is that a line item that like the billing private insurance and the non-Medicaid, is that a line item in the budget here?
So what we would do, and what we do before we access county funding in that way now is the county's really our payer of last resort. So we're going to work through all of those things that we can, and we'll give an accounting of that. Sarah mentioned some of the reports that we give. And by the time it would get to the amounts we're requesting tonight, we would have backed out all of the other revenue we've been able to collect. We will be in dialogue and have been in dialogue with all the commercial payers about how to get them involved in that. And there's some codes that I think we can bill now, and there's others that will be a negotiation with them. But I think in the context of our crisis continuum here, we have a lot to offer because of what we're doing here in this county. And hopefully we get that commercial insurance support from folks. Really, the county funding ultimately, if you look at the revenue, other sources we have available, we're really talking about folks that are uninsured and adults, or really underinsured. And we're seeing a lot more underinsurance with some of the types of health plans that are available right now.
So I highly value bringing the services to people where they are, where they're needed, and where they're most comfortable. All of our other first responder kind of services in the county are free to customers, to clients, patients. How do we explain that to people to make sure that they know what they're getting and what they're expected to pay?
Edie, do you want to talk about that? I'll talk a little bit about it and then you can chime in. But I think again, right now, that's why we're asking for consent and talking to folks on the front end about that. We could also have some conversations about what it might look like to have it look differently. But again, it really becomes tricky when you're leveraging the state Medicaid plan and you're charging one, even though most folks with Medicaid aren't going to have a financial responsibility, we're still charging them and their plan for the service. And it becomes an equity issue and a compliance issue if you're really selectively charging some folks and not others. And that's where something like a sliding scale or the ability to charge the fee and waive it becomes really, really important. And again, I hope we can continue these discussions so that we can have it feel right for the community, and where that consent to treatment is so important. Co-response does not cost anything. So I do want to distinguish that. There's no charge for that. Again, we're not asking for consents and all of those things on the front end of that. Or if we are, it just looks different. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think this Commissioner Reed, I appreciate the clarification, Commissioner Woolley, and I wonder if Jared, maybe you can just speak to what does it look like tangibly for the crisis callers, the crisis counselors to be asking consent before dispatching mobile response? Because I would imagine that you're probably not having conversations about the financial piece of it. You're getting consent. And then when anybody from the MRT lands there, that they are having a discussion about disclosing what kind of information needs to be gathered in order to provide a service. So I wonder if you can just kind of answer what looking like consent or searching for consent looks like, and then Edie, just kind of what it looks like to disclose that transparently before moving forward and whatnot with a parent.
So we'll make our initial attempt to de-escalate the caller over the phone. We'll make it an offer of the mobile response team if over the phone support is not the service that's going to meet their need in that moment. We'll ask where they're located, if they would consent to someone responding to their location. And so there will not be a conversation about financials during that crisis contact. And it would be up to the mobile response team to then ask for consent in additional time, to provide the service in the person's home or the location that they find themselves. So to clarify, we'll ask for consent to send the mobile team to their location, and then they'll review the referral and make a decision about whether or not to go out, as well as facilitate the rest of the conversation about consenting to the service.
So again, as the mobile response team, when we arrive on scene, we might not have that financial conversation about how much it's going to cost, but we will be able to collect information and get consent with them, because we don't want this to be cause them to be in more crisis or to be a hardship. So we will do it very similarly than our walk-in emergency clinic with the access clinic, where they talk to the person, they help them resolve the issue and identify resources, and then have the conversation around sliding scale fee, insurance, and the ability to waive the fee if there's just no possible way for them to pay for it. And that's kind of our process. The immediate conversation would be consent that we're there and they're willing to talk to us. But we might have that other conversation the next day when we follow up with them. We can look at that process. We've been talking about it with leadership about how that's gonna, how we're gonna do that. So.
There's one other piece to consider in this puzzle, and that is what the evolving role of the intensive care coordination team does with Heartland Radec. That's a service that is entirely funded by the county to provide that team. So there is no charge to the client. And because we wanted to bridge that gap when we were trying to address crisis needs in the emergency department, that if somebody needed support, to walk with them as they were connecting to regular services at Burt Nash, at Heartland Clinic, et cetera, at DECA, that service, that team would be available to serve somebody who may not want to engage with one provider or another, or needs that sort of ongoing support for 30, 60, 90 days. So that is one, there's been questions about, well, how is this service paid for? And the answer on the intensive care coordination service is it's paid for entirely by the county. It's also intended to be available to anybody in the county who needs that type of support on an ongoing basis. It's not 24/7. They don't respond in an hour, but the referral process, I think it's within 24 hours.
All of this conversation is a really good reminder why universal health care would be a great thing, so that we don't have to ask somebody when they're in crisis whether they should have to pay or not, because they need care right away. And so I appreciate the questions, but I think it just illustrates a system that doesn't work really well, because we have to figure out who pays for what. And Stephen, you mentioned our sliding scale. I appreciate you mentioned that. Can you remind the public who pays? There's been a lot of, we talk about things that are free, like co-respondence is not free. It's paid for by the city of Lawrence, right? Their police department. And when ambulances come, we pay for part of that as a county, so I know it doesn't feel there's no charge right at the time, but that's something. Our sliding scale comes from what?
The county actually is a major funder of our sliding fee scale. And we have some state funding that allows us to do that as well. And again, we have a limited number of things where we can completely waive the fee, and our sliding fee scale starts at $5. If Edie and her team came out, our sliding fee scale again is very generous. I think up to $70,000 or $80,000 a year. It's published on our website, so people can look at that. Someone might get a $5 bill for the service of us coming out for an hour or two. But again, we always have the ability to work through that. And we do work through that. And we would never let that get in the way of providing care. But yes, universal health care and Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion would be a significant thing. I mentioned the 56%. If we had Medicaid expansion in the state, all of a sudden, states that are CCBHC with Medicaid expansion, I don't wish to live anywhere else, but sometimes I do think it would be nice to be in a CCBHC state that also has Medicaid expansion, because now your 56% is more like 75 or 80%, which takes a lot of pressure off of municipalities to step in and cover this gap. And again, we're fortunate to be in Douglas County, where I don't know if we spend the most as a county on behavioral health per citizen, but maybe Sarah knows it's got to be one or two. It's got to be up towards the top. Nobody quote me on that. I just know it's a lot and that we're fortunate to be here.
Yeah, I just don't want anyone to leave this conversation being afraid to call for crisis services because they're worried about paying. We're very fortunate to live in Douglas County, and that the community of Douglas County has made this a priority. And so as we talk about when they get charged and where they get charged, I don't want anybody to get that message that should be a barrier to getting service and getting the help they need.
Please call if you need help. Please, we've got a team of folks here that really want to go out and make a difference. So please call, please.
Any other questions from commissioners at this time? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to provide public comment on this item? Please come forward. And if you all can just hang tight in case any questions come up that we might redirect to you.
Gene Dorsey, I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I had two questions. One is, what percentage of all your calls come from Lawrence and how many come from Eudora and Baldwin and other areas in the county? That was one question. The second one, maybe Sarah can answer. Is this 70,000 coming out of general funds or the tax, 0.25 tax?
Great, thank you for your questions. Before I have staff or guests respond to that, I just want to see if anybody else here has public comment on this item to provide. Please come forward.
Just in general, I'm definitely for 24/7 access to crisis, but I'm kind of curious what the response was, or hypothetically, if they didn't have any response to it, the Michael Black incident where he was shot by police. The police showed up there at 5:30 and he was shot at 7:30. What transpired on the crisis center? How did they handle that? Or if they were available, if they weren't available, how could they diffuse a situation like that? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to provide public comment on this? No one in here. Has anybody raised their hand online? Okay, go ahead and close public comment and bring it back. Sarah, can you address the one question about funding first?
And I apologize, I missed the question. I was looking down at something, so if someone
I,
could repeat
I
the question.
think Mr. Dorsey was wondering if the 70,000, and I believe that's for the sliding scale, or I'm sorry, the 70,000 that's being requested, would it be from our general fund or the quarter-cent sales tax?
And
Is that
Bob,
right,
is
Mr. Dorsey?
that the right question?
Okay, sorry, I
Okay.
just want to make sure I captured it.
And yeah, all of this is behavioral health sales tax funds.
Okay,
There were two requests in the recommendation. One was for 22 and the second was for 23, just for clarity.
And both will come from the sales tax.
thank you. And then Edie, you're probably best to respond to the question about, or Jared, how many from Lawrence versus elsewhere in the county? And I know that's only about 6 weeks worth of data so far.
All calls have been from Lawrence. And then KSPHQ fields between 100 to 200 calls per month from Douglas County. So that ranges on a given month. But the
So
mobile
all
response is-
calls has been dispatched within city limits of Lawrence so far. And a majority of those you mentioned earlier have been from law enforcement. So from LPD directly
Correct.
making referrals.
7 out of 8, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'll ask Edie a follow-up here just for a second. Sorry, I always do. So I know on a volunteer fire department that we often, if a situation is not safe, we have to stage and not engage until PD or police department has said that that is safe for us to be there. I assume that is a similar situation for your team, that you can't go into a situation that is not yet safe. You want to
That is
address
correct.
that?
We would not, and I'm not familiar with the situation that the gentleman brought up, but if it's not safe, we would be in the background or we would be called in at some later point. We would not go into any situation where there was any weapons or any threat of weapons or any domestic violence or any of that that's active.
Commissioner Reed, I appreciate the robust discussion. And I've been personally really excited for mobile response team to get off the ground. And it has been a real, I think, a game changer for the long run to have the CCBHC model in place, and just also the timing of mobile response team and 988 coming online is really critical. So I'm super grateful for all the collaboration that has gone into this and what I know will be continued constant conversation. Edie, I was glad to hear that you're at late nights and weekends are able to office out of KSPHQ's office as well. So just really appreciate that there's lots of ongoing conversations and enough flexibility to adjust as we figure out what the needs are and what the gaps in fulfilling those needs are. And I certainly support any effort to eventually get us to 24/7 coverage. And I know there's a few pieces to that. Funding is one of them. Complete staffing is another. And the sort of resources you need for that. So for me personally, I am supportive of this request and really want to keep moving forward with expanding the capacity of those services, and excited to see what kind of impact it has elsewhere in the systems, to Commissioner Kelly's point.
I too am excited, and I know Bert Nash is providing super service here, and I appreciate the help of KSPHQ and all the partners that you have. And I'm sure that there are going to be hiccups along the way. I'm sure there are going to be times when the service is not provided in quite the way, or that you don't have it. I think it's important to start, with Bert Nash, seeing if they can figure out how to address that as quick as possible. But, I'm very excited about it. It looked like we were going to get quarterly updates on that data. Is that right, Stephen? I'm seeing head nods. Yeah, quarterly updates, and hopefully we can have some discussion there. Maybe not every quarter, but maybe, twice a year or something, about how the service is going, so we can make sure that we're responsive to those who are funding the services.
I'm also supportive of the request for both the 2022 and the 2023 budgets. I do realize that this is a, you know, as a pilot program, there'll be a lot of data forthcoming and the project will evolve. So I'm excited to see how that happens, what we learn from it. So even looking out to 2023 with this project, I think there'll be a lot of variables that come in within that time frame. So I would be open to other updates or amendments as we move forward.
And the last thing I'll say, and then I'm happy to make a motion if it's okay with commissioners, is Sarah, I would like to see those accountability factor, you know, whatever we decide, those key performance indicators that are worked into it. And I'm going to encourage our partners to push a little bit on that, right? To put something out there that you're not sure what it will, you know, this is our aspiration. So if our aspiration is to get emergency room visits down, let's see if it does, right? It doesn't mean we've failed if we didn't get as many as we'd hoped. It's just data that tells us how the system is being impacted. Some of the ones we listed on here, call rate, that's all awesome, but I'm also interested in seeing how it can impact the system as a whole. Because I think that's what we're really trying to do, is create a behavioral health and a physical health system, and all these working together that gets the results that we're looking for. We want fewer people accessing these services in the long run. So that I'd ask for, Sarah.
Commissioner Kelly, before you make a motion, I have a few more.
Yeah.
All right. Just in terms of the investment that we make in behavioral health, we make that investment because of the human cost of crisis. We also make that investment because investment dollars on the front side of crisis save us dollars in the long run, and the human cost of, you know, justice involvement and trips to the emergency department that didn't need to happen. So very glad and proud to be able to invest in behavioral health on that level. I'd also ask, just kind of as a point of order, Sarah, when we have like a comprehensive plan amendment, we get the whole comprehensive plan, you know, in the packet, or the portion of the comprehensive plan that's being amended. So if we get an operational plan amendment, can we also get that document that we, because I'm, you know, as I'm new coming into things and learning how we interact with some of our community partners, I'd be glad to see that even after the fact. That doesn't impact how I would vote tonight, but I'm just out of curiosity, I'd like to see that either now or in the future.
Yeah, I think appreciate that. Yeah, traditionally, we haven't included the whole service agreement in the packet, and oftentimes that's not done when we bring this to you, because we want to take this action and then work on the draft agreement. But particularly in this particular situation, we could certainly add that to my weekly memo at a future point when we get that worked out, would probably be the best way. Those are authorized under my signature based off of commission direction. And so we could certainly include those, and then maybe we generally do these every year. So we could, when we work on it again for the spring, we can certainly loop the commissioners in on the larger set. And as you guys know, like we talked about this a lot at budget. I'm really, you know, we've made a lot of progress in this work to move from, you know, paying funds to community-based organizations simply for being good people, and to trying to hold organizations accountable for the taxpayer dollars that they're spending and ensure that we are getting an excellent stewardship of our dollars. So it's been a long process. It's been a difficult process. We're still working on that. Bert Nash, who went through a ton of work in that space to get us to an agreement that we feel really solid about. So I feel really good that particularly in this situation, we've got a good agreement to show you. Not that it won't get better over time as we continue to work on it.
I don't have anything else to add, so I'd entertain a motion.
Commissioner Kelly, I move to authorize county administrator to amend the 2022 community partner agreement with Bert Nash to provide up to $70,000 to support the implementation of mobile response team in 2002, and expand the team to provide coverage between the hours of 8 a.m. and 2 a.m. 7 days per week at a cost not to exceed $220,000 in 2023.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you all for being here and fielding our questions. With that, I believe our regular agenda is concluded for the evening. I'm gonna ask commissioners if we could take just a quick 5-minute break, because I need a bathroom break. We'll be adjourned until 8 p.m. All right, we are back on the record and we'll resume our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for the quick break. All right, we'll move on to appointments. And as I'm reading that, I believe that Sarah, you did send one along to us. Does either commissioner have that pulled up? I
Yes,
don't
Commissioner,
recall.
Consolidated Fire District 2, I believe Bill Stark is eligible for reappointment.
Go ahead.
I did have a conversation with the chief of Fire District 2, Palmyra Fire District, and they are happy to see Mr. Stark be reappointed. I did not have a conversation with Mr. Stark. I hope he feels the same way.
And I would entertain a motion. Always excited when somebody wants to be reappointed and do another term of service. I guess I can make the motion. Move to reappoint Bill Stark to the District 2. Sorry, everybody, District 2 Fire.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for your patience as I fumbled through that. Any other appointments to discuss right away? Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to your memo, Sarah, and any miscellaneous items to discuss.
I appreciate it, commissioners. I wanted to try to take this opportunity before we jump into my memo. There's been a lot going on this week, and so I wanted to try to say a few words at this point in time, and then, I think there'll be additional conversations as we go. On Monday, LMH Health and Bert Nash issued press releases about our ongoing work to open and operate the Treatment and Recovery Center. I was surprised that the releases came out on Monday after the great conversation and update we had last week to the community. Collaboration is hard, so hard. I've been working closely with Dr. Thompson, as well as representatives of LMH Health and Bert Nash to address and resolve issues. I'd hoped we could speak positively and hopefully about what our shared collaboration will return for this community. I'm really saddened that I need to step away from that work and talk about issues that I'm confident we will work through together, like we always do here in Lawrence. And I don't say that because I'm concerned about the transparency part of the conversation. I'm very concerned about how this will reflect on the Treatment and Recovery Center. And I really have been cautious about how we've spoken and the language we've used, because I believe so deeply in the quality and the commitment of the individuals that are working in that center. So it's really with a lot of reluctance that I have to make some of these comments. Douglas County is working closely with BHP to prepare the TRC for opening. As we outlined last week, we are very much still working on the best way to operate this community asset. A lot of things have been said in the last few days about our intent. And I wanted to say a few things about what has gotten me to this point and where I think we are now. Douglas County is committed to opening the Treatment and Recovery Center as soon as possible. County staff have been working tirelessly to make this happen for years. To that end, county staff were surprised to learn in May of 2022 that BHP had not yet applied for a license. County staff were also concerned that BHP had not explored alternative licensing scenarios, given the fact that the Crisis Intervention Center regulations had not been finalized by the state of Kansas. BHP failed to apply for license until July of 2022, nearly a year after BHP's first executive director, the director before Dr. Thompson, identified licensure as one of BHP's top priorities. Behavioral Health Partners is a contractual commitment to their contractual commitment to Douglas County was that BHP would be prepared to open the TRC on July 1st, as outlined in our pre-funding agreement. Despite identifying licensure as a key priority in July of 2021, BHP did not convene any licensure discussions with KDADS until during the 8 months from July of 2021 through February of 2022. The first pre-funding agreement expired at the end of February of 2022. Douglas County did not receive a proposal from BHP to extend the terms of the pre-funding agreement until May 27th. On June 1st, the commissioners approved the extension to provide reimbursement for expenses incurred through June 30th. As illustrated, the county has worked very fast to get needed agreements executed, faster than our partners. On June 30th of 2022, the county's second extension of that pre-funding agreement expired, and I did not even have a draft revision or extension. I want to remind the commission that since September of 2021, the county has paid LMH and Bert Nash over $1 million for the purposes of developing and opening the TRC. Over the summer, it was clear to me that in addition to clinical and operational steps that needed to be taken, numerous legal agreements between LMH, Bert Nash, BHP and the county were not even in development. I knew that if we were going to open and operate the facility in 2022, that contract work needed to start immediately. Finalizing those contracts would take much longer than BHP anticipated. I'm confused by assertions that the center could have opened on July 1st, given those factors. The only services that could have been provided at that time are existing access center services that have been and continue to be offered today by Bert Nash in the community health building. On August 1st, I informed the BHP leadership that the county had serious concerns about BHP's ability to open and operate the center successfully. I asked for a plan for how it is intended to get the center open. BHP was not able to provide that plan at that time. I asked that the plan be completed by the end of the month. I told them if the plan was not achievable, executable, and realistic, the county would have no other choice but to find a provider that could do that. The county gave BHP a list of tasks that the county deemed necessary for the TRC to open and operate successfully. On August 23rd, BHP presented various written documents to the county. Those documents were internally inconsistent, incomplete, and demonstrated that BHP was not ready to open and operate the center successfully. Many accessional tasks were incomplete and some hadn't even been started. To ensure that the county had the expertise needed to review and evaluate the readiness materials, Douglas County secured outside legal counsel with expertise in healthcare to assist us in that review. We've been working with Folston and Associates out of Wichita. It was important to ensure that the taxpayers were getting a fiscally responsible operating plan. I was also given a revision to the pre-funding agreement that would have extended it through the end of the year and required more funds than what was previously agreed to. At this point, I was in a very difficult position. Douglas County has the obligation to open the TRC. Sales tax funds used to build and operate the center came to Douglas County. State funding to operate the TRC comes to Douglas County. LMH Health does not have that obligation. Bert Nash does not have that obligation. As of today, BHP has also failed to submit a TRC budget to us so that we can submit it to the state for state fiscal year 2022-2023. This would have allowed the county to finalize $3.1 million in funding commitment from KDADS to support Douglas County in operating the treatment recovery center. My understanding is that budget is under development, and I know it's being worked on, but today I don't have it. Because of all of this, on September 1st, I informed LMH Health, Bert Nash, and BHP leadership that I thought the plan was insufficient and that I plan to recommend that connections be brought in to augment our local partnerships to ensure the TRC could open and operate successfully. My intention was and is that the TRC will operate with local staff provided by Dr. Thompson and his team. Since September 1st, substantial progress has been made. That's great news. Agreements and action steps that were delayed months have been accelerated. I think all of that is tremendous progress. As the paper reported, LMH Health and CEO Russ Johnson acknowledged in an email dated September 12, 2022, that BHP had not been proactive in communicating with the county, had not heard the county's concerns, and that readiness materials provided to the county were not carefully done. In the past 2 months, I have met numerous times with BHP board members. I speak to Dr. Thompson almost daily on this work. My time, as well as the time and efforts of Bob Tryansky and County Council, have been substantially devoted to this work over the last several months. In late September, the BHP board proposed a number of changes to their structure to create more independence of BHP from their member/owner/subcontractors of LMH Health and Bert Nash. These are important actions for the health and sustainability of the TRC. In that same correspondence, BHP board invited Connections to return to Lawrence as soon as possible, for the exact words, for a series of meetings with Dr. Thompson, LMH Health, Bert Nash, and other TRC staff to outline the needs of the TRC and BHP and learn more about the support Connections can offer as we approach opening, and that they looked forward to this opportunity and they welcomed the additional resources and expertise. So I want to talk a little bit about connections. As we discussed last week, LMH Health, Burt Nash, BHP, and the county have been working with Connections since March of 2019. This relationship precedes the formation of BHP as an entity. Connections has been engaged in the development, operations, and planning of crisis services for 20 years. They have pioneered the model of crisis treatment being implemented here in Douglas County and across the country. They are the foremost subject matter experts in the planning and operation of these facilities, and their work has been devoted to supporting public sector partners in serving their most vulnerable persons in the needs of behavioral health care. LMH Health, Burt Nash, BHP, and Douglas County have visited their facilities in Arizona multiple times. Visits to Arizona for this work inspired Dr. Thompson to join this effort and this team. Connections has been our collective role model in this work. It is unfair to characterize them as anything less than that. Some analogies have been made to this project in the 2020 effort by LMH Health to replace local physicians that oversaw the hospital's emergency department with a large national firm, Envisions Physician Services. I think this situation differs substantially from that effort. In that situation, LMH Health tried to replace local doctors with out-of-town doctors. In this situation, Connection would replace administrative functions like IT and finance, functions that were going to be subcontracted to LMH. All clinical services will be led by Dr. Thompson. In that situation, LMH Health tried to replace local expertise with out-of-town expertise. In this situation, the county wants to supplement local expertise with national expertise, not replace. As we discussed last week, the decision to operate the TRC under a provisional private psychiatric license created additional potential hurdles to opening. LMH Health staff have recently identified several potential safety and compliance issues, including the need to retrofit card readers, door hinges, and plumbing fixtures to comply with the higher level of anti-ligature requirements of a psychiatric hospital. County staff estimate that this could take a minimum of 8 weeks to order and install the equipment required. That being said, I'm eager to work with Dr. Thompson to continue our work, to learn more about what he learned last week from his conversations with Connections, and share a plan for opening with the community as soon as possible. There's been a lot of talk about the county's recommendation on these issues. I prepare the county commission agenda every week. When staff is ready to make a recommendation, I will put it on the agenda. Until that time, we're still working, refining and developing. We do this every week. Once staff prepares that recommendation, the commission makes the decision. And even after that, we're still working to implement and shape our work in the community. I'm committed to working with BHP and our community partners to make the TRC successful. We're meeting daily to work through issues, identify roadblocks, and determine structures and services that are needed to best serve the community. And I will report back to the commission as frequently as we can on this critical project, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from my fellow commissioners for Sarah? I don't have any questions. I just want to take the opportunity to state that I believe fundamentally that Douglas County staff and ultimately the Douglas County Commission is working to move forward with this project with the community's best interest at heart throughout that decision making, and really trying to ensure that that the TRC opens on the best possible footing with all available supports and expertise to ensure that those services are safe and excellent, really quality services and consistent. And so I think it's a really important point just to reiterate that the way that county staff have moved through this conversation with our community partners in the past several weeks, months, throughout this year, in recent months in particular, has really been with an eye towards continuing the spirit of collaboration and figuring out how to adjust based on some new information and some changes over time that certainly could not have been foreseen necessarily in the beginning iteration of BHP and how this project was originally envisioned and organized. And so, and I know that in my conversations with staff, have expressed that that's an important value to me, that there continues to be a spirit of collaboration towards how we are, because that's the point of integrated healthcare, right? That all the people, all the community organizations and healthcare providers that touch behavioral healthcare and how that is integrated with some physical healthcare, it is that we see more and more continuity over time and more sort of predictable services and outcomes for all residents of our community. So that's really important to me, and I'm confident that our staff have kept that at the forefront of their minds with seeking the sort of accountability measures and benchmarks that we need to feel confident that the TRC is ready to open and operate.
I have a strong and growing trust in Dr. Thompson and Dr. Thompson's leadership for the TRC. I'm excited to see his work there, and I think the staff that he's hiring feels the same way and has a lot of loyalty there. I also want to say that the voices that are collected within the BHP board are the voices that we want from the community to speak into this process. They are very valued voices there. I'm also disturbed to see other entities claim to speak for BHP in the media in ways that they do not have the right to, but also that are directly contradictory to ongoing and frequent conversations that I have with Dr. Thompson and BHP board members. I just want to clarify who we are able to work with, and that they are able to make independent decisions and have their own voice. And that's an important piece of us to know how we move forward is to know that exists.
Sarah, I want to first recognize how hard it probably was to list all that out. And I'm sorry you felt that you had to do that. It's really unfortunate, I think. You know, I understand some of our partners feeling that it was a move that they had to make possibly, or but I think there could have still been more collaboration before we got to the point that we're at right now. As I talked to community members over the past couple days, I wanted to affirm to them that I think it was fair to give you a chance to respond to the concerns that, you know, to why, you know, and you've said you haven't made a recommendation, but why you brought this to the BHP board and our partners at LMH and Bert Nash. And so I'm sure the public appreciates hearing your side of that. I think we have to own that in some ways, and maybe not we, maybe me and some of our past commissioners on how we put the BHP board together. I think it was truly intended to create collaboration, but I think it's created some structural issues. Commissioner Willie, I agree with you. I'd like to hear more from BHP and those board members. We put that board, for those who are unfamiliar with it, that board was put together with 3 appointed members from Douglas County, 3 appointed members from Bert Nash, and 3 appointed members from LMH. That's created some tension in my working with the board, and I think we have subcontractors who are actually on that board, you know, the executive directors of Bert Nash and LMH that are serving on that board, and I think that creates some serious tension right now that needs to be resolved. And I'm pleased that we've had some communication from the BHP board that they would like to resolve that they have some ideas of how to create a better path forward for that. I think as a community, we have to think about our allegiance to local support. It is my aspiration, I want to be very clear here, my aspiration to have the Treatment and Recovery Center locally governed and locally operated. But we may not be there yet. We may need to develop, we may need to build more capacity. I don't think that means we're bad. I don't think that means we're weak or any of those things. I think it's something we have to consider. Sarah hasn't made that proposal yet. That's not in front of us, but I think it's important for us to understand, like, what liabilities is Douglas County willing to take on if they say the only operator of the TRC can be certain entities. And I think we may say that that's a liability that we're willing to accept. I don't know, that's still up for discussion, and that's still something that we need to talk about. But I think it is something our community needs to wrestle with, because with what Sarah has outlined here, I think anybody who hears that would be concerned. And so I think there is lots more conversation to be had. I understand those who want to get the center open tomorrow. Count me as one. I would have loved to have it opened much earlier, but I also want to make sure, as I said last week, that the first person who walks in the TRC gets the treatment that they deserve, and that we have systems in place to make sure that happens. It won't be perfect. Let's not pretend it's going to be perfect, but let's make sure we've done all we can in due diligence to make sure that we're giving the best service that we think our community is capable of providing. So Sarah, again, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I think that there is still place for us to work together. I don't know whether our partners will feel that way. I hope the community will have some patience with us. Some of these things I think can happen relatively quickly. But we've got to get to work on it. We've got to get to work not fighting through press releases and in the newspaper. It's people coming together with a sense of collaboration.
This is Commissioner Reed again. I really appreciate some of those points, and I want to acknowledge that as a townie, I understand the sort of Lawrence exceptionalism, Douglas County exceptionalism that takes hold. And so I understand those reactions and feelings, and I check myself on them all the time. This is one such example. And that I think that we really have to, again, consider the best interest of the community at large, and acknowledge that maybe we don't yet have capacity to do it best or do it better. And that there's a real, in my opinion, a real need for leading with humility in this space, and acknowledging where perhaps the shortcomings or the not quite there in terms of capacity and level of local expertise required for the kind of vision that we have here, which is a big vision. And I'm really excited about it. And I know our community is too. And I am completely confident that all of the community partners that have been a part of the visioning thus far are critical components to continuing that actually playing out of and delivering that vision to our communities. So I just really hope that folks reflect on the idea that sometimes there's a real power to self-reflection and humility, and figuring out that sometimes we need to ask for a bit more support. And again, a recommendation hasn't been brought to us. These are constantly evolving conversations. And in my opinion, I think that, and it's stated in Sarah's comments this evening, is a big reason that those conversations have been ongoing amongst the community partners and not a part of regular public conversation at our commission meetings per se, to try and stay focused on what are the things that aren't quite there, or that we recognize as barriers to opening, and as potential challenges once we open, and what are sort of the plans moving forward. So I'm grateful for the conversations I've had with community members in recent days. I certainly understand some folks' concern or reaction that the county was not forthcoming with these ideas early on, but again, that's because it's not a formal recommendation to the commission yet. It's staff really trying, as with all things that the county does, trying to sort of troubleshoot and workshop projects as they evolve and different barriers present themselves.
I'm very interested in the ongoing conversations and to see how we meet the needs of all of our community partners, because there are significant financial needs of how things need to interact between, say, Burton Ash and the TRC. There are pieces that are vital that we get that right. We still need those conversations, and we need everybody at the table to help make those right. Ideally, we want to see all of our community players within the behavioral health and physical health spaces being able to play to their strengths within the TRC and benefit from the TRC. It's also okay if there are other pieces that we need temporarily as we're building that capacity to bring in from other partners. And that is an appropriate thing to look at also, because as we'll know, like it's our commission and our commission meetings where the public will come and ask about what happens at the TRC. It's not going to happen at the LMH board meeting or the Burton Ash board meeting or others. I mean, this is a project that kind of starts and ends here, but we don't do this alone by any means. And we need those community partners to be engaged on any level that they can. And I am open for conversations, and I am all ears to see how we make these pieces work together, because I think there is a perfect fit. We just have not gotten there yet.
Sort of want to underline a word, may, at this point. You know, that doesn't mean we've set on anything just yet. I think there is still time to figure out, do we have the capacity locally to do this? I mean, to me, that's still a may, but we've got to get going. We've got to start working together. We've got to knuckle down and figure out what it is that we need to make sure we can open this place on time in an appropriate way. That's going to evolve as those conversations happen. I've been privy to some conversations where there's some technical issues, and I think that's fair to explore those technical issues or around how things are funded and who can be, assigned as partners. And so Sarah may not have a recommendation. Our recommendation may be to work with BHP. I want to be clear on that. But we have work to do. And what I want to do is not be using the public arena to be doing this work. I think it's important and I'm charging Sarah from my role to try to get in there and do this work. And I'm hoping that BHP and all our partners want to get in there and do that work, so that we have confidence in this center.
Thank you. I appreciate, Sarah, all the work that you put into this response, and I agree with Commissioner Kelly that couldn't have been easy, but necessary. And in my opinion, this is the right time and place to respond and address those discussions that are happening publicly. So without any further questions or comments on this topic, are there anything else in the memo that you'd like to highlight for us this evening?
Yes, just real quickly, just a reminder that we do have a work session next week on the 26th for CIP, our capital improvement program. So a lot of work is going into getting that wrapped up and getting that in your packet for next week. And then also, commissioners, we've been working on a last judges luncheon for 2022. If I could have commissioners check their calendar for December 1st, we think that date will work with the judges. You don't have to let me know right now, but if you can let me know if December 1st can work for lunch with the judges. If not, we'll keep looking for a date. And that's all I have, commissioners.
Thanks, Sarah. This is Commissioner Reed. For the record, December 1st works for me. And I also want to acknowledge, since you mentioned the work session next week, this month has sort of been passing me by, but I want to inform fellow commissioners that I I will not be physically present for next week's meeting. I may be virtually present. I'm going to discuss that further with Sarah, but Bob Transky and I will be traveling to Toledo, Ohio, and going for a peer learning network that National Association of Counties is hosting. So I'm gonna double check the agenda times, but I don't believe that it's gonna align well with me being able to show up on Zoom. But I'll stay in conversation with Sarah about that and appear as possible and necessary.
And I'm kind of monitoring the agenda as it's coming together at this point. I don't see any issues that would be a problem if there are only 2 commissioners attending, but I'll get that worked out by the end of the week.
Any other miscellaneous items for the good of the order this evening, commissioners? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.